Welcome to a PowerPoint presentation brought to you by a man wearing sunglasses. Otodom.pl, real estate website. And we're going to be using good old Scrapy and Python. So if that's of interest, let's get going, shall we? This is the real life proposal on Upwork, which is, I've picked out D because it had the fewest. I think they want about 10,000 from the link D. They actually say it's for Polish websites. It's actually the same website but for different areas, for different regions. And they want one CSV per each of the websites, per each of the links. Probably the easiest way to do that is just to make 4 spiders and just run them all separately. Trying to write to different CSV files from one spider can get a little bit messy. We'll be looking at request and meta, and we'll be using VS Code. I'm actually using VS Code on Linux if that's of interest. Which is surprisingly good. I don't mean that in a derogatory way to Linux, and I just wasn't quite expecting it to be so similar to how it performs in Windows, so yeah. Okay, so I thought I'd describe the process of how to scrape a website using a spider, and as always, you'll start with your start requests, and then you go to your first method, which is called parse. And for anybody who's not familiar with Scrapy, parse will pretty much extract or allow you to extract the bits of information you want from what you would call the parent level, the main page with the 20 odd listings per page. And sometimes those listings don't have all of the information. You need to obviously click on those to visit the unique listing and get more details. So we'll call that the child level, and for that we'll also have a second method, and we'll call that parse details. So parse, we'll call parse, or parse will get a response from the implicit method, which is start requests. These are all Scrapy methods, by the way, so if you're not familiar with Scrapy, just hang in there because it's not quite as overwhelming as you might think. Effectively, you can write a spider with just one method. If you're only getting details from the parent level, i.e. if you're managing a property listing without going into all the details of square meterage and geo coordinates and so on, if you just wanted the name of the property and say the area and the number of bedrooms, that's often on the listing next to the thumbnail on the front page, where you would have, like I say, probably 20-25 listings per page. So all that could just be done with parse, the parse method. You actually have to type that and you'll see that in due course. Anyway, parse then goes to, it will then yield to parse details, which will then extract any additional information that wasn't on the parent level on the first page. So you drop down into the details page, and then parse details will get the additional bits, and it will then bundle in using meta any details that were already extracted from the parse method. So parse could, for instance, here it will get title, price, and so on, and that will pass those using meta down to the more detailed level, the child level, parse details. Then parse details will yield everything to the CSV. And what I've just described will happen once per property. So that will happen once, twice, all the way down to 20, reaches 20, the bottom of the page. Then within pass, it knows because there's a yield which will then follow the link to the next page, and all will become clear when I show you the code. And you may not want to yet because you don't know if this is a good video or not, but trust me, it is. So, you know, thumbs up because Algos. And if you're ready, let's get into it and look at the site, and then we will start writing some code. So yeah, hang in there. Right, enough nonsense. Let's study the website which was on the Upwork request. So I only speak English and a tiny bit of Spanish, and this is in Polish. And it was mentioned that it will be required to to hand over the CSV with the correct characters, these accents over the various letters which we don't use in our main English alphabet. So yeah, just one thing to bear in mind, make sure that the characters all have the correct accents and so on. So yeah, Otodom.pl, and I've no idea what any of these words say. I can see there's some areas there, so let's go to Krakow. And I'm guessing those orange diagonal bits are promotions or something, so we may not want to get those, or we may do. And first thing I'll do is I'll scroll down to the bottom, and you probably know what I'm going to do. I'm looking for how I will handle the next page navigation, and rather than infinite scroll, it's got the slightly easier to deal with method where the numbers increment all the way up until you get to the last page. So if you look on the arrow, and you probably can't see it, but it says page 2, so if I hover over there, it's trying to take me to page 2, obviously, and then it will go all the way up until there are no more pages. So inspect element, and that is very small, but let's make it bigger just for the sake of this video. And sorry about that. Yeah, so there we go. There's the href. So you can see I'm currently on page 2, and the href is going to take me to page 3. And ultimately, let's go to page 4, and then there should be no more. Yeah, so that's grayed out. Look. And because that's grayed out, if we inspect that element, the href, which is, if you can see there, just where I'm hovering the cursor, the href is empty, which is good because we can say something like if href then next URL equals href, and if there isn't an href, then it won't go to the next URL. So yeah, that's fairly standard. And I think it's probably time to go and look at some code that I've already done, because I started it, sorry. So we have, let me just make the font slightly bigger. I'm on my Linux Mint VM, and I'm running VS Code, which, yeah, what's not to like? Import Scrapy, from scrapy.crawler, import crawler process, from Scrapy, import request. Now, this is going to be a fairly, I'm going to try and make this as minimalist as possible, because Scrapy can get quite convoluted. I haven't said that word for a while. So let's just go down to the end. And what I've done is I've just put these red dots are breakpoints. However, for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to use them to identify key features of the code. So you'll have seen this many times if you've seen my other videos, or if you've ever watched Maxim Code Monkey King videos. What we do here is we say if name equals main, process equals crawler process. So you instantiate an instance of crawler process, and then you call the crawl method and you pass this class. So Otodom is the class which is here. So every time you start a spider, the first thing you do is you do your imports. You can obviously add to your imports as you go along. So just because I've got these three here, at some point I may realize that I need to add, who knows, JSON. I'll do import JSON or datetime or OS. Import OS would be a good one. Then I could remove my CSV each time. Yeah. So crawl, then that's the name of the class, and then process.start, which is fairly self-explanatory. And yeah, if you've not used Visual Studio before, I don't know, I've never used PyCharm, but this is quite a nice feature. It doesn't kind of, the tooltip, it doesn't get in the way too much because you have to hover over the word for, yeah, probably half a second or so, so it doesn't really get in your way. Okay, so these three are pretty standard. You will, as a bare minimum, I would recommend using these three. Line 10, class Otodom, which is the name of the website, and then we will use a spider, so scrapy.spider as opposed to crawler, for instance. Crawler will visit every link it comes across unless you deny it. Spider is where you specify the URLs to visit. You kind of know in advance what URLs you want to visit, so that's my simplistic understanding of it. Name. This is the name of the spider, and to be honest, because we're using crawler process, the actual name of the spider doesn't really matter. It's obviously it's got to conform to some sort of standards, but yeah, we'll call it Otto. We won't call it anywhere, and the only time it would be used is if you're using the Scrapy command line, where you would say Scrapy crawl Otto -o, then results.csv, for instance. If that doesn't make sense, I'll just quickly, yeah, so if I wasn't using crawler process, which if you don't fancy using Scrapy crawler process for whatever reason, then I'll just show this for anyone who's new to Scrapy. You would use Scrapy crawl and then Otto, because that's what's in the name, then -o, and then results.csv. Yeah, that's enough of that. Okay, custom settings. This is where you can tell the spider where to output the CSV. I've just left this as purely as a file name, which means that the results.csv file will end up in the same directory as where the spider is. So if we just do ls here, you can see, let's do this one as LA. There we go, it's a bit better to read. We've got the spider's directory which Scrapy created when I ran Scrapy start project. Otodom. So if we see these spiders, I can't remember if I've deleted it. No, I've cleaned it out, but this directory, we've just got the spider in here. But when I run the spider, you will also see that's where the results.csv file will appear. And it will appear in there because I've not added any additional path to it. Format CSV, good old CSV, comma separated values. Start URLs. So this is what, let's just show you what that is. That is one of the 4 areas, and that was what was specified in the come on, browser, what's going on? There we go. So this is the actual area called Winagem, which we are scraping. So looks quite nice, doesn't it? Right, headers. You can copy and paste this from, you can Google it and just copy and paste it in. It doesn't change very often. Type in what is my user agent and you will get something like this, which you can then just paste in. Yeah, nothing to worry about there really. So we've covered the standard bits, we've covered the imports, we've covered the main driver, which allows us to run the spider from, well, to be honest, now I can run it from within my IDE, which you may use Genie or PyCharm or whatever, but I'll be running my spider just by pressing F5 to run it. Right, so we've covered that, and we've covered main driver. So what's left? The 2 methods. So implicitly, by default, Scrapy will run a method called start requests, and that runs behind the scenes and it gets a response. What it does is it goes off to this site and it collects the HTML from this page and it returns a response object. Now, from line 18 onwards is where we have to start writing code ourselves, really. Def pass self response, that's kind of, if you follow any Scrapy tutorials, that will be, that's always the first method that you will need to type in your spider. And again, if you've not realized, when you run a Scrapy start project, you get just show you this. If we just do view, there we go. So there's a couple of extras in there, but really all of these files that you're seeing here, with the exception of results and readme, which has been generated because I've saved this onto GitHub. So Autospider gets created inside the spiders directory, which is the directory below where items, middlewares, pipelines and settings exist. Anyway, def pass. Sorry, I did a paste there and it put in the URL of the start URL. What we want to do is say cards. So every advert, listing. It's fairly standard to call them cards. And what you want to do is identify all of them, or identify what each one, what will get all of the card. So if we, let's just try this one for instance. I'll show you what I mean by a card. So you click on that, then you do inspect, and then you kind of work your way back up the DOM until it highlights everything that you will want. And that's too high. So that's just the image. Article ID, listing title, offer item, and we're trying to find something which represents the individual advert without including anything in anything extra that we won't want to get. So okay, so that's everything, but to be honest we don't even need to be that high up because we're really not interested in the photo at this point. I don't believe the photo was part of what was requested, so if we keep going down the DOM, let's try this instead. Inspect. What I did was I actually turned off JavaScript just to kind of thin out what I was dealing with. So yeah, if we go inspect element, and hopefully this will be a little bit more. There we go. So okay. That's the entire advert, that's the image, offer, item, details. Now I think what you want to do is you want to go as low down the DOM as you can, but still include everything that you potentially might want to extract. So I've come down to this level, because if I go down any lower, it's going to start potentially, yeah, that's too low because I'm down to the individual pieces. This is the lowest level in the DOM. That still allows me to select all of the bits that I need. So offer-item-details and offer-item-details. So as you saw, that will fetch, or it will pick out the whole bunch of pieces of information that I want, and then within that it contains the price, the title, the number of rooms, the link. So when you're getting all of this, you don't need the period character. You want to get everything that matches that right from the top level of the DOM. Now you don't want to use get either as well, because you want to keep it as a response object, because then you can lower down, you can isolate, you can go per listing. So if you imagine, this would find 27, and then this, within this block, this runs 27 times. So that's why we're isolating each listing with the period character. And what we're doing is within that block, the top response object, we then use get, which then extracts the text or the href. Price, title, rooms, link. I've actually converted this back into English because it's easier for me to work with. Potentially, to complete this job, I would actually maybe use Google Translate and then just tidy it up and keep these all in their native language once I had learned a bit of vocab. So 4, if you remember the initial slide at the start, parse, so all of this works at the parent level. Once we've got the details per listing at the parent level, we gather all that information and we use meta. So with meta, we've got, if you imagine doing it as a human being would, you would go to the first listing, you would write down from the top page, the parent page, here you would go down and you would write down the number of bedrooms, the description, the price. Then you would click on the details, you would go down a level to the what we're calling the child level. Then you would get opis, which is description, I believe. Then you would get all that, you would get any of this information. Once you've got this information, you can then yield to the CSV. Now when you yield to the CSV, you actually need to do it at the end, if that makes sense. So at the parse details level, you will then run yield. And that whole sequence repeats per every advert, per every card. Once it's done that and it's sent all of that information from the top level, the child level, bundled it all together, sent it to the CSV, that method then quits and you can then, it resumes back within the for loop and you repeat that all over again. You repeat that all over again for every listing on the page. Once it gets to the bottom of the page, then, so for carding cards, so there'll be 27 on the first page, so this will run 27 times. Then the next URL is what I showed you earlier. If there's a next URL, i.e. as long as you're not on the last page, yield response dot follow, and that takes you to the next URL, and the next URL is equal to this, the next page. It's the href of the next page. And fortunately for me, this was a full URL. So once we've gone through 27 items and dropped down to get the details of those 27 items, gone through 27 of those, we go to the next page and then callback. Callback equals self.parse. So we need to do that to tell it to go back to parse here and start that whole sequence all over again. So advert, go to the details, send the top page, parent information and the child information, put it together, send it to the CSV, go back to the second item, third item, fourth item, do that all the way down to the 27th. When it's run out of items within the for loop, then it goes to the next page. Repeat, rinse, repeat, and eventually you'll run out of pages and there endeth the spider. So I thought today I'd rather talk through this rather than do the code, because just purely doing the code, it's unique to each spider and every spider you do will be different. even this could be different next week. The reason I use XPath is because sometimes that can future-proof your selectors slightly. I've not used contains or starts with here, but potentially if you use contains, I could use contains here, and if they changed that class name from, I could have done contains next, or text, comma next. And then it would always be looking for a button that had next on it, or the ID of the button was next, because if you remember, the button that just had a little arrow on it. Right, this is fairly standard. You'll always need to do this. You won't always need to go to the next page. You might only be scraping something that's got 10 results and there's only 10 results on one page and you only want one page, job done. Yeah, request. What I did here was, if you remember, I imported request up at the top. So what I said was request. So request with capital R is the Scrapy method. Request with the lower case r is my variable, and what I do is, rather than saying yield request link blah blah blah, I actually try and tidy it up by defining my request, setting it to a variable, and then I just do yield request. Link. So link actually is what so request the link. So link is that, you can see the highlighting there. So 27 times it goes off to this link, and then the callback is basically saying do this next, and then self is because it's within a class, so it's using an instance of the class. Pass details, which is what we've called this. You don't have to call it pass details. You could call it pass _2. You could call it whatever you want, but as long as you reference it here, comma, meta equals. So you've got a dictionary here, and that dictionary contains 4 values there, and those are the 4 values which price, title, rooms, link. We've collected those 4 already, so we're going to pass those 4 pieces of information down to pass details, and then pass details will go off and do whatever it needs to do on the details page at the child level. And then it will also, from memory, it will then go and retrieve the 4 variables that were passed to it as meta. So there we can combine the 4 variables from the response. So the response in pass details is actually, that response comes from here, comes from this request. So just because we've got response here and response there, those 2 responses are not the same. In this method, the response is the information passed to it from start requests, and down here, response is the chunk of information which has come from this request and this link. So if we were on the 5th advert or the 5th listing, then response here is equal to the information sent from the 5th listing. So all of that information here with meta is from the 5th listing, and all of that is sent to parse, and parse treats all of this information here. That equals that, and then it parse details uses all that. Those four plus opis, which, if I show you opis, so we've clicked from the parent level, we're now down at the child level, as I'm calling it, and opis, I think that means description or information, and then we can gather all of that, which is what I'm doing. If I click on there, inspect element, I'll just show you. There we go, the CSS 1B, I3, IB69. Oh, in actual fact, I didn't need to do that. I just got the paragraph text. Yeah. This was the only paragraph text that, yeah, no, that's okay. Paragraph text, and if you look in there, let's see, text. I don't know what that was. Oh, those were list items. Okay. So those were list items and this was paragraph text, which meant that by getting the paragraph text, I was already getting this. I don't know what that was also. Was I getting that? No, because that's a list item as well. So the only paragraph text was this, which meant paragraph text, get all. The reason why I used get all rather than get, if I'd used get, I would have only got the first line. By using get all, I got all 6. Because as you could see, if we just do inspect element on there, there are many p tags which have got different sections of the information, opis. Polish word opis. What does that actually mean? Description, specification. Yeah, description. See that? Okay, thought it was. Good. Well, I thought this would be a bit different rather than just watching me type code, which I have done many videos of that already. So if you're interested, you could go and look at my Craigslist. My Craigslist one, which is quite comprehensive, nearly 2 hours. Food.com, that was a particularly good one. It had Ajax Infinite Scroll, and all of my recent videos have been scraping Amazon, which hasn't actually been collecting parent and child information. The focus has been more on price tracking, as you've probably seen. This, by the way, I would just like to thank Patrick Klein. Unknowingly, I've had a couple of comments from Patrick in the past, and today I was trying to use CB_K kwargs with request. I just happened to go on Stack Overflow, and lo and behold, Patrick had already answered somebody's question about this in the past. I think the problem here is that you're passing CB kwargs to request, which request in turn doesn't accept. So use meta. So if you're using request, stick with meta. I was trying to be all modern and up to date and using CB_kwargs. But meta, a dict that contains arbitrary metadata for this request. This dict is empty for new requests and usually populated by different Scrapy components, extensions, middleware. So the data contained in this dict depends on the extensions you have enabled. So yeah, CB_kwargs. A dictionary contains arbitrary metadata for this request. It is empty for new requests, which means by default callbacks only get a response object as an argument. Okay, good. In fact, kwargs was introduced in version 1.7. Prior to that, request.meta was recommended for passing information around callbacks. After 1.7, CB kwargs became the preferred way for handling user information, leaving request.meta for communication with components like middlewares and extensions. So I'll leave that with you because, yeah, I had this error also. Unexpected keyword argument or something like to that effect. And as Patrick pointed out back in May 2020, you're passing CB kwargs to request, which request in turn doesn't accept. Right. Disable JavaScript. Remember that. It's quite a good extension because the first thing when you start to analyze a site, it's pretty handy just to turn off JavaScript and see what doesn't work. If everything works, then you're laughing because it's nice if you don't have to start tinkering with JavaScript. By the way, if whilst I'm having a chat with you, all I thought, I sound like a headmaster, don't I? Oh, sorry, I don't mean to. Oh, what is his name? There's a very good video by a man who works for Scraping Hub. Yeah, hi, back. I found it. This is really good. Well, I think it is. For the level that I'm at, I think this is fantastic. The diagrams are all in Paint, which, yeah, I think that's really cool. Nice minimalist, and it does the job. Scraping dynamic websites without Selenium. Further_reading. And really, really good description of DOM versus Ajax and extracting data from JSON with the API, and it's also he's using the Scrapy GUI, which I've not used. Does anyone out there use that? If they have, Is it good? I don't know. Is it worth using? I'm a bit old school. I prefer kind of Scrapy shell and all that. So yeah, drag me out of the dark ages. Yeah, that's really, really good. Don't be misled by the paint diagrams. Yeah, if you're going to watch any videos, rather than watching my back catalogue, if you've only got half an hour left, go and watch this. It's brilliant. Enough said. Right. I think it's probably time just for me to shut up and read and run this, isn't it? Let's go. And that's the problem with VS Code. It keeps nagging you with lots of kind of pop-ups saying, oh, this isn't working, that's not working, and so on and so on. Or something's running slow, or do you want to hide this message and all that. It's trying to be helpful, but I think it's a little bit too helpful. I think I'm getting overpowered by this candle, so just for a bit of excitement while this is running, I'm just going to blow the candle out. There we go. I'm going to stop that now because otherwise I could get banned, and I don't want to because I haven't really fine-tuned my... I haven't really gone in and tuned the settings. So let's just open that. Oh, that's nice as well. Don't show again. Yeah, so just a quick double click and straight away you're viewing it in... you're viewing the CSV within VS Code. That saves kind of waiting 20 seconds for OpenOffice to open up or anything. So yeah, that's a bonus. I think I will do that anyway, just for lols. And then it will be home time. I'll let you all go home. Sorry, that's just it's a flashback to my childhood when teachers made us sit quietly. We all had to be silent before we were allowed to go home. What the was all that about? Teaching discipline? Well, hasn't worked, has it? Anyway, I'm not going to start ranting on about old school. Here we go, OpenOffice. Just for a little bit of visual entertainment. Oh, and look, it's the spelling dictionary spell check thing is it's underlined just about every single word. I think it's because I'm set to United Kingdom English or whatever, and it's just underlined the hell out of everything. So yeah, that's why I'm getting quite animated. Apologies. Price in zlotans. Oh, one thing I do need to do is I just need to remove the white spaces from the price and trim the zlotans off the end. Title. That's something like, you know, nice bungalow in wherever. Link. That is the URL which we actually then go and visit. And once we visit that URL with our request.follow, we then end up with all of this description, the opus, I don't know how you pronounce it, the opus, I'm going to call it, and look at all that. And how many results did I get? That was really quick, even though I'd throttled it back. I set auto throttle on, and also download delay. What's up in there? Huh? What the actual... sorry, gross incompetence. Anyway. Yeah, so that scrapes 427 properties just while I was talking nonsense about childhood at school being made to be quiet before I was allowed to go home. This has probably been the most random, talkative... I need a drink. Might have been the candle. It's probably made me. I was going to say hi, but I'll probably get banned by YouTube for sniffing candles. And my videos are all set to over 18 or restricted, or this is not made for kids or something. I don't know. That's the world we live in, and you're not interested in that, and nor am I, because I'm more interested in web scraping because it's fun. Well, it is when it works, and this works. So yeah, I'll put the link in the description, and please do. I'm not going to ask you to subscribe because that's up to you. But if you like the video, then well, how do I know? If you think it's rubbish, then if I get no thumbs up, then I'm going to assume it's rubbish, and I'm just going to go off and I don't know. This has been quite random, and I hope you liked it, because, you know, if all my videos were just PowerPoint presentations in double speed, and do you like the ones where I do them double speed? Time is money, isn't it? But have a look at my playlists. I've got lots of videos with XPath, selectors, Scrapy, various Scrapy settings, items.py. All of the Amazon ones feature pipelines, which I was a bit afraid of years ago, but pipelines is very, very cool. So have a look at the pipelines, Amazon videos. They are probably my best ones to date. And the food.com one. Well, actually, when I say food.com, let me just try and if I just try and show you, what one was it? I think it was, yeah, this is a bit of a risk because I might come up with Dr. Pimple Popper, which nobody wants to see that. What was it called? Infinite Scroll. There we go. Yeah, this was probably one of my, apart from the recent Amazon ones, this was probably one of my better videos. About 2 hours long, and a huge amount of editing and work went into it. I'm not after sympathy, but I'm after I'm after people to read, to watch it and use it and say thank you, and that was really good, and thank you for scrapingfood.com and showing us how to do that. I sound like David Brent now. Do you know Ricky Gervais' Office? Yeah. Well, on that bombshell, I'm going to fade away. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll be back. Well, probably soon. If not soon, then not quite so soon.